Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about Cross, the television series based on the James Patterson novels, starring Aldous Hodge as Detective Alex Cross. All 8 episodes are currently available on Amazon Prime, and my guest today is the production designer, Elisa Sauvé. Elisa, welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm also happy to have you here. Warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers. And one additional note, I've been looking forward to this conversation because Cross is set in Washington, D.C., which has been my home for more than a decade. And the show makes a real effort to capture the feel of the city. But before we dig into that, Elisa, share with us some details about the production schedule and how you got involved with this project.
I got involved with the project because I received some scripts from the local producer, Chris Agustin. And I met with Chris and with Ben Watkins, who was the showrunner, and really hit it off. I loved the scripts right away. At first, it was funny because I was a little hesitant. I thought it might be a show that was just like a police show. And, I'm not really a big fan of that. But it really got twisted right away, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, that's how I became involved. I basically pitched the show and was lucky enough to get it and work with some really great people. Ben Watkins, who is our showrunner, and Craig Siebels was our creative producer, and Chris Agustin, those three were a really key kind of trifecta to kind of honoring this the scripts and the show and DC as much as we could. In terms of production times, as we know, we used to say that if you didn't have money, at least you had time. Now you have neither, and the expectation is really high. So I think we did really well with the resources that we had. And when I say we, I mean all of the heads of the departments. And we had really smart producers that really made us part of the team, and together we decided what was really important and where we should put the bucks. Timelines were very tight. We had 12 weeks of prep, and that meant not only finding locations in Toronto, but also scouting Washington, D.C., learning what Washington was, what the capital neighborhoods were like, but also the Black neighborhoods and some kind of iconic places that we were interested in. At the same time, designing the main sets, drawing them, pitching them, getting construction going as quickly as possible. So when you break that down into 3 months of work, that was quite tight, but we did it with shining colors. And our shoot schedule was tight as well. It's the first season. We had 8 days per episode.
Wow, that is tight for everything you're trying to get done on an action show like this. So this focus on DC, was that always the intention of the producers with this show, or was that part of your pitch that you really should make it very real? Because a lot of that comes down to production design and your budget trying to make it so.
Yes, well, that really did come from Ben. He was in fact, his wish would have been that we could have shot more in Washington, but, we quickly understood that it was financially very, very difficult for us to do because we'd have to have 2 teams. And so you try and use the resources you have to the best, extent that you can. So that was always on the table. What I do think that I bring always as a production designer, I like to know where we are based and where our story is based. I've done Toronto for New York. I've done Toronto for almost every state. And sometimes it's really difficult. And
I can imagine.
And you just don't understand why you're doing it. But we've shot in like quarries to pretending we're in, Arizona somewhere. But I mean, typically it's New York or Chicago, bigger cities. For me, it was really key to go to Washington and understand what that really looked like, and then pair it with locations in Toronto that could really, really work for that. And I think when you are doing that, when you're playing one city for another, I think it's our responsibility to really understand what we're dealing with and what we are departing from. If we choose to do so, I think we need to know that that was a choice and that we decided to not go that way, even though that's the way it looks. It was there on the table to shoot in DC always. And then I think that myself and my team did a really kind of good job of representing that.
Talk to me about some of the specific sets where the research you did in DC informed decisions you made in Toronto.
Well, from the very obvious, say Metro PD. You drive around that capital area, and we went to the police building, and we saw all the architecture there and the scale of it and the scope of it. It's funny because I designed Metro PD even before I started the project. I had a plan of just things basic that I wanted, like tensions that I wanted as they entered, or glass or conversations that you couldn't hear, like in Altman, behind the glass, it's over there, and details that I wanted in my head that I wanted to help apply tension, like a column in the wrong place, so that the viewer kind of wanted to, like, the camera to move to like see what's happening over there rather than, just anyways, I'm digressing. But I was able to design the interior of Metro PD without exclusively like having the exterior location, because that's a building that's kind of, the windows are kind of typical in their scale and their size, and it's, you're really living in the bowels of the building there. So that was one thing, going to DC, seeing that neighborhood, seeing the type of architecture and buildings that exist there for the police headquarters and things like that. That allowed us to kind of understand where we should be looking here in Toronto for our exteriors. Then neighborhoods like the Shaw, and we went to all the go-go places, and we walked around there and got a feeling for the community that exists there. That was kind of key for some of the other scenes that we played more in the neighborhoods or in some of the houses. Well, also Georgetown, beautiful neighborhood with incredible homes and gardens. And as well, it's funny, I wasn't aware that Toronto actually does look a lot like DC in many ways, not as a whole, but when you break it into different areas, I think it played quite well. So yeah, and then there were things like Ben's Chili Dog or Chili Bowl. I always call it Chili Dog.
Yeah, talk to me more about Ben's Chili Bowl, because that is an iconic storefront here in DC.
Yes. So I think I'd seen a scene in House of Cards where he goes and meets someone there for a lunch or something, but it's like a little tiny corner of that space. And I kind of started researching the place when I knew we were going to go and look at it. And it's really a significant, iconic place in DC, and I think in the States, really. I guess Ben and Virginia opened it in the late or mid 50s. They say that Martin Luther wrote part of his speech there. They were open throughout, like, all the marches during the riots. They feed the poor. Like, they're a really interesting place in American history, I think. And so when we went to scout it, I'm not 100% sure that Ben was like, okay, we're going to build this. But when we went in, it's kind of breathtaking because it's just got so much gravitas, down to the broken tiles. And you're like in this building that was like an old theater, and it's just, everything's been painted over, and you see like the wires and the conduit, and it's just an amazing place with photos of so many, important people in Black American history, like plastered all over the walls. Of course, it was the place where Obama had his first public outing, I believe. And he went and ate a chili dog. And anyways, after scouting it, Ben, our showrunner, as we walked out, he said, we're going to build that on stage. And I just nearly cried. I was so happy. And so that was another thing that, thankfully we had really great producers that understood the need to send a couple of set designers down to document this place and measure it and, photograph it, and so that they could come back and we could do our own interior on stage. I think one of the highlights of my career is that Virginia, who is 90, and her daughter, Vida, came to see the set. And I brought the art department out, and the people that had done the set design, that, had drawn it. And I think it was a magical moment for everybody. They were in tears. They couldn't believe, like, she was like, oh my God, down to the broken tiles. I'm embarrassed. And, it was a real treat.
From a practical point of view, what are some of the advantages in what you can do when building the set on stage versus trying to actually film in the real Binge Chili's bowls, other than just the distance, but other advantages you have from being on stage?
Yeah, the real advantage of being on stage is that, there's the magic of movies. So you can make walls move, you can put a camera where in the physical world it's not possible. That I think is the first advantage. I kept pretty close to the original design of Ben's Chili Bowl, except I did there's like a middle kind of wall that I added windows to that on the real location, they're like walls. And so obviously just for cinematic, capacity to be able to like see through and stuff, I did some changes on that, but mostly we replicated it. And always the advantage of being on stage is that you own the place and you can go to it. Like if it snows and then you're snowed out and you don't lose the day, you've always got the capacity to shoot.
Talk to me about some of the other sets that you're most proud of on this. If you don't mind starting, I was very struck by our villain, Ramsey, and the complicated nature of his sets, where you have this upscale buildings. You alluded to some of the Georgetown neighborhoods and such, but also, I mean, he has these dungeons and the certain creepy aspect, as we announced with spoilers, he's our villain. How did all this come together in a way that it's jarring, but in just the right amount of jar?
Yeah, Ramsey was a little bit of a tough nut to crack because he's not a superhero. He's just an evil villain with a lot of power. And you want to kind of make his character a little bit bigger than life, but then, you don't want to be ridiculous with it either. And he has many properties. So that first, I mean, the show is out, so spoilers away, I guess. But the first house that we see of his is this black and white house, which I was thrilled that we found because I think he is a black and white character. And obviously, it's always a challenge. DPs don't always love that, but we embraced it. And I think it worked really well. And it was this house that supposedly we made this backstory and then I think it ended up in the script that it had been a bordello or something like that. And so they had a basement that was like dug down, or, during Prohibition, they made whiskey. I can't remember. There was just something so that we could have, through this room that I built on stage to match the black and white house, that Samson and Cross break through the wall and find this spiral staircase that goes down into this space. And it sounds silly but it was a little bit of a difficult space for us, like to land on something that everybody was happy with. Because for me, it had to be like architecturally, it had to make sense with the house and the age. And then also with the money and power that Ramsey has, that he could have modified the place as he does modify everything to suit his needs. So that was actually quite fun to design. And, it was great. We were talking with my art director, David Best, about this idea that, the dark room, because he has this fetish with Ouija and he shoots his own photos. So the props were really big on this one too. And, we came up with this idea that the lighting in the whole room would go to red, like in a dark room. And it actually added a lot of kind of danger element or, mood, I guess, to this space. So that was like the first kind of thing that we had to design right away, even before having the house specifically. We had to kind of everybody agree on what this would be, and that we knew there would be an exit to a tunnel at some point. And so we obviously built the tunnel as well, which is super fun always, because it's really obvious the magic that we can do in movies when you build something stupid like a tunnel, because you're outside of it and it's a build, and then you go inside and even you believe you're in a tunnel, right?
Right.
And then Ramsey had, he has this magnificent house, which is actually a location that exists in Toronto that we modified with like more current furniture and changed the furnishings inside. But between those two worlds is the world of all the people that kind of work for him, or other people that are kind of wanting to kill Cross or get back at him for something he's done. All those worlds kind of are quite macabre and extreme in their own ways. But in terms of Ramsey, I think another set that was very challenging and fun creatively was the art gallery set where he takes his victim to on I think the second episode. So it was meant to be like a memento mori kind of images of death group exhibit. So, it concepted up, different things. We had like a projection of maggots on a wall. Like you don't see it all in the show, but these blood boxes that looked like people had been murdered in them with hands, and that really plays out in the episode quite nicely. And the final scene was this concept I had of like the Last Supper, but with this kind of death of the Venus, and and death of faith and everything. And it was another amazing moment because our producers really went for the idea of hiring a live model rather than getting a dummy. And I think it just really grounded everything. Yeah, it's a beautiful image. So that was a very fun, challenging set to design.
Yeah, all of the work that went into that, it really plays well on the screen. And I thought it was the perfect background for this early aspect. This is sort of where Ramsey is kind of playing cat and mouse with his victim, kind of seducing her and bringing her in. But to make a decision like that, for the producers to invest that kind of time and effort into what essentially just plays out over a single scene, did you have to make other trade-offs or just a head on budget? Or are they just saying, no, this, we want to invest in this scene specifically because of the, I don't know, what was their reasoning behind this investment?
No, we didn't have to compromise on other things. It was on the script that they went to this art gallery, but some of the things that were scripted were just there as almost placeholders, just to kind of give me some kind of an idea of what this was. But really, what we ended up shooting was really nothing like what was scripted. And I think what happened was that there was always a desire on behalf of Ben Watkins, and our pilot director was Nzinga Stewart, and she was quite kind of enamored with this set as well, of course. So I think that once we started to concept things up and think of, okay, how can we do this cost effectively but really visually impactfully, I think we succeeded, because it was not actually, I mean, obviously it was an important set, because I think it's the moment, like you said, that you can start to kind of wonder a bit about Ramsey. Like, and if it had been anything else, if it would have just been like, I don't know, Jackson Pollock or Bacon, like splashes of red on a wall, like that, the production value gets lost. And I think if you want your character to be scary, any little opportunity you get to do it right just lets the show move forward with the viewer really believing, and then they're compromised, then they're scared for her and they want to see what happens. Like, so I think everyone thought it was important in terms of like solidifying Ramsey as an evil kind of guy. And I think for the viewers, it was like, whoa, they went far with, like, how far are they going to go? We didn't skimp. And like with the police station, you look at that police station, it has to be huge. It's like a metro homicide division, like for Washington, D.C. If it had been like, half the size or whatever, it's like, you need to believe that these characters are real. And you do that. Like, my job is to kind of support with the production design that says, yeah, like, look, they have like some dead naked woman on a table and blood boxes, and like, this is real, right?
Yeah, I thought it worked. Tell me about some of your other favorite scenes over the course of it, whether it's the one set that maybe we just visit at a time, or the ones that you have to invest in because the show is going to go back and forth over all 8 episodes.
Well, I love the cross house. That one was tough because, of course, for the cross house, in order to finalize the design of it, we had to have an exterior to understand if it's arts and crafts, if it was, what kind of a house it was. And so we had layouts that kind of like a Rubik's Cube kept kind of shifting with the reality
Right.
until we landed on a house. But it was a good one to design because it's a house. But through that house, for me, it was important to kind of show, it's an elevated reality a little bit, but to show that this family had a history, and that they were grounded in their community and that they had been there for a while. And it was just a beautiful set to design. But in terms of other things, I mean, I really loved designing Ramsey's bathroom for the final episodes. That was a really, it's also kind of a smallish scene. And Ramsey's study, the one that it's his study with all the artifacts and Ouija's on the wall. That was a beautiful set to design and to dress. My set decorator, Brent Kelly, did a really stellar job with, just all the tchotchke and the dark objects and everything that we brought to it, like a curio cabinet. It was like a curio cabinet set. The wine cellar was super fun. And the wine cellar was actually quite technical because we had to get the actress in the cupboard with a hole big enough for her to be able to, look out and see what was happening when Ramsey hides her in there. So we worked really closely with our cinematographers who did a really great job as well, Brendan Stacy and Jeremy Benning. What else? There were so many like sets that were just so fun. There was a set that we built into an abandoned school, which was kind of based on that Starship building in LA, where all these kind of bohemian hippie squatters took over. And so it's not just a squatted building, it's kind of an art house, crazy psychedelic thing. And so that was quite a big build. I think we had a week to construct the elements that we had, built on stage and set them in and then paint. And then we had tons of graphics and set decoration. And it was a bit of a labyrinth, that place. So that was a big location dress.
And those are those scenes, if I remember correctly, where our character Brenda has been set upon, Alex, and they had that confrontation in that back area. Is that right?
Yeah, she's kind of an addict, and I guess they give her a gun to try and kill Cross with. And yeah. And there's like a rave happening, and it's that was big, but I think it shot really well as well. I guess the motel rooms, motel rooms are always fun because they're just kitsch to begin with. But that they had to have like the mirrored rooms, and Bobby Trey, he does such a terrific job of being so creepy. And I guess there's two others that just come to mind, and I'm probably forgetting so many, and my team is probably going to yell at me for
we won't
this
let
or that. But the cabin, Ms. Nancy's cabin, that was a complete set build. And we were so crunched because remember, we had 8 days an episode. So in the 8 days that you were shooting one episode, you had to find the locations, design the sets, build them, paint them, decorate them, do all that in 8 days, right? So it was quite tight. And so we built Miss Nancy's cabin, and then we had to build a replica on the parking lot because we had to set it on fire.
That's right.
So, and it was a period. It was kind of, like had some period elements, but my set decorator had to find doubles of things, that we could do that in. And there was also a fight in there, so things had to break away. We ended on a complex note. That was the last episode, I guess.
I want to ask you about a set from the episode before that. Your work played a really important part of maintaining the momentum of the story, because we've really had two storylines going throughout. We know that Ramsey's a villain and that Cross is trying to catch him. Check. But meanwhile, we have someone else who is stalking our hero, who's not related to Ramsey, but is sort of been invisible and just sort of a voice and done some spooky things. But the episode before, Cross finally finds his house.
Yes.
Tell me a little about that set, because from my perspective, that raises the stakes again. But it's really because the character's not in that scene, our secondary villain, if you will. But it's important that he becomes a threat very quickly there. And so talk to me more about putting that together.
Yeah, that's interesting what you just said, because we don't see him in that scene, do we? But the house is him, his mind, right? So there's a young woman who died in prison that was his sister, and he's out to revenge her death because he thinks Cross did this to her. And it's a whole other story, but you got to watch the show. Anyways, so, when you're looking for locations and you are on such a tight timeline, and you really push to the best that you can, like I do and my team does. We don't settle. It's like, no, let's keep looking. Let's keep looking till right down to the, to the last moment. That's what we did. And our locations team found us this abandoned house, which was a perfect backdrop because it was a mid-century home, which I liked, just the lines of it, that it's simple, but it was owned by some school board and it had been shut down for I don't know how many years. So things were already a bit decrepit. So I walked that house and we kind of landed on, okay, this guy, in this one room, we really have to show years and years of his insanity. And so that's what we did. So it was like so first we concepted it and sold it to the gods. They approved of it. And then my graphics team and my scenic team just killed it because we produced so much. And a lot of it had to be like, we had to have photo shoots, we had to make newspapers, we had to, and then the many layers of like the walls and then the graphics and then on top of that the drawings and then the thing. And I think it worked really well. Like when you see that shot of Cross in there, you're just going, holy shit. Like, and it's another kind of moment where production design has to kind of sustain these characters, make them believable. And I don't know that you see it in the show, but I wanted to have girly posters by his mattress, like to give him an additional creep factor, So yeah, that was a big dress. It was a big scenic and graphics job and really led incredibly well by my art director who, made sure that everybody had their marching orders. And yeah, I was very proud of that set. And I think it shot really well as well. A single light source. I think we had one light, one lamp, and that was it. It was good.
Now, we talked about scouting DC in the beginning, but then the primary filming took place in Toronto. How much filming did take place in DC? In other words, and it was just to come down with the actors for a couple of days or to shoot a couple of iconic exteriors. Just give me a sense of what happened and production design's role in that.
When we went down to scout during our initial prep, it was the producers, Ben, the showrunner, and Zinga Stewart, who was the pilot director, and myself, and our cinematographer, Brendan Stacy. He did the first block. Initially, I think Ben's wish was to shoot more, but then you start to put everything in its place, and it's like, oh, okay. And then you see Toronto, and you go, well, okay, we don't need to do that there. What do we really need to do? And I think it was Ben's call and Nzinga's. But so there was one element that we always knew, which was the opening sequences. And nobody said this, but to me, it's kind of like a little bit of an homage to the Sopranos opening of Jersey, because that's really what it felt like. It was just very simple and just like driving through different, like seeing different things, almost like a slideshow or a stream of consciousness of this town. And I think that was done really well. That was shot by Jeremy Benning, I believe. I think it was loose and really fresh and uncomplicated in a way. And then we knew that we needed certain things. So we shot, even though on stage we had the mural wall and the exterior of Ben's chili dog, like the facade and that little laneway and like a bit of a curve so we could put a car out there. We were never really out there. We were either really tight to the window looking in, or just in deep background, you'd see the backdrop. So Ben's chili dog exterior, we shot.
You mean Ben's chili bowl?
Yes. No. Oh my God. Why do I do that? I'm sorry. Okay, should I say that again? Because we always talked about chili dogs. I think, sorry, Virginia. Okay, so Ben's chili bowl, we shot on location in Washington, D.C. We needed to get wides and, Samson and Cross and people coming in and out. And that was great. And we did shoot some scenes for the pilot that took place in Washington. I think the coffee cart, when Shannon's getting coffee with her mom in the first episode or something. And then some of the scenes that had to do with like seeing the Capitol buildings and things like that. So I can't remember, and don't hold me to this, but I think maybe we shot 5 days or something like that, or 3. It was minimal. but it was significant, like minimal amount of days, but we got the things that we needed.
And then, so as the production designer, are you then working with the cinematographer and the director of that episode to figure out what they're going to see or what you might need to do? Or, I mean, what sort of investment of time and energy does it take when you are just really honestly running and gunning and not, again, you're trying to do all of these things just in a small window like that?
Well, what I like to do is go and learn and take lots of photographs and make notes. And then when we're back, I put a presentation together of the things that we saw that I loved or that maybe somebody mentioned. I asked, I put a pitch together like, oh my God, this neighborhood with this thing and look at that. And so I pitched those things. Obviously, DP, director, showrunner, they have their ideas too. We put them together. And typically as well, what I'll do is I'll work with locations to say like, okay, look at these things we loved, but I think we can find those here. And I'm thinking, and I live in Toronto now, so I can also, and I've worked here, like we work together, like, oh, I'm thinking about this for that, or what do something similar, give them direction so that there's things we can match. And then there's things that it's like, no, we absolutely need to get this in DC because that's like too difficult. Why would we replicate it here if you can just pull up a lens and get that there? So yeah, I think it's always, filmmaking is a team sport. And anybody that says it's all them, they're full of it because it wouldn't be any good if it was all just one person. It's always made better by, the creatives that we are lucky to work with and brainstorm ideas. And yes, there's heads of department and we have visions and things, but it all kind of comes together in this giant chaotic puzzle that's not really done until you've shot it or until you've reshot it. So yeah, I think in terms of Washington, D.C., I think there were things we knew we needed. There were things that surprised us that we found. And then there were things that we knew we could replicate honorably.
Well, in terms of how that team comes together, talk to me more about your role specifically with the work in DC.
I think my role as a production designer is to kind of when we're scouting a location or a place, I think it's to organize the visuals in terms of our story. I think my job is because if we're going to Washington to shoot Washington, I'm not going to be changing it. But I have the eye and the bigger picture of the whole show to say, this fits in really well with this, and this could help augment that. Or, if you shoot this and then we are here in Toronto and it pairs really well with that. So I think it's my job to kind of put the pieces together, like the production design of the whole show, whether it's on location or it's in the studio, and kind of guide the showrunner, the director, and the DP with those things. So I think that's what I did with Washington. The art department is really the hub of any project. All of the information comes from us. I think that our biggest job is communication with all the teams. For example, so I'm organizing Washington, D.C. visually, right? And that is not to say that I have the final decision. That is to say that I can pitch ideas and hear what people's desires are and put that together into something that makes sense and that responds to the bigger picture of the show. And that is that way for the whole series. My job is to be in charge of the look. And that means everything you see except for the actors. And so if I'm in 12 weeks of prep, having to scout in DC, scout in Toronto, design the main sets, talk with my team, build the hero props and get things approved, start to build, it's not only just to make the set, but because, for the art department per se, we need to communicate with the rigging grips so they know where to hang the pipe. We have to communicate with the electrics so that where's the lighting going. The DP has to be happy with like our pitch and the look, and we have to order the backdrops. And then we have to build it and paint it and scenic it and decorate it and then put in the furnishings and then put in the props and let the directors block and see. It's such a big responsibility to keep every department going. My job is to be ahead, by days of everybody else, at least conceptually. And that is like my job, to lead that way, and share that information. That's production design.
Well, for this series, I got to say, I enjoyed it. I thought it ended clever with a satisfying ending to the season 1 story, but some dangling threads. What can you tell us about season 2?
Season 2, I think, is a completely new story, but I cannot say much to it. I turned down a second season because I started on a new show called The Greatest, on the life of Muhammad Ali. And then, the strikes happened, etc. That got pushed. And I'm happy to say that we are starting again now in January. But I know that the season 2 art department team was fantastic. And I'm very excited to see what they have come up with. I'm not sure what's happening with the danglers. And I think I'm not allowed to say, even if I did.
We'll spoil the stuff that's aired. We're not going to spoil anything that hasn't come out yet. Well, on that note, though, we'll call it a wrap. Alyssa, it was great having you here.
Thank you so much.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info on our website, below the line, oneword.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and links to all of our social media. Please check it out. So, Alyssa, you mentioned the show you moved on to. Tell me a little bit more about that. We're next going to see your work.
The project I moved on to was a feature film in Europe called Steal Away, which is just now in its final stages of being cut, under director Clement Virgo, and it's a magical realist story, and it was really a wonderful experience. I spent the year doing that. So there's a new series for Amazon Prime called The Greatest. It's a limited series, and it's based on the man, Muhammad Ali. So it's a very exciting project, and I'm very honored to be a part of it because, of course, I have tremendous respect for Muhammad Ali and who he was. So we start production on that in January, and I'm very excited. I can tell you that it's a period piece that takes place from 1960 to 64, and the people involved are really incredible. Again, it's showrunner Ben Watkins that I did Cross season 1 with, and yeah, it's going to be really rewarding.
Oh, good luck. I'll keep my eyes out for it.
Thank you.
Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and all of our listeners, I appreciate you. The Below the Line logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Just around the corner is our Oscar series, where industry professionals discuss the nominees in their category of expertise. We're aiming for 13 episodes of Oscar goodness this year. Fingers crossed they all come together. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.